Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am Ge Flammang, and that is the John Brice of the Football Scoop. We are going to talk a lot about what's been going on with Notre Dame in the offseason, DC searches, GM searches, Notre Dame's roster, Notre Dame's NIL situation, and also there was a report this morning about Joe Rudolph possibly interviewing with the Chicago Bears, or there's at least some interest there from both parties. So we're going to talk about that as well. So action-packed show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we are going to go live. Links to the podcast, as always, are in the description below. And this show, as always, is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2025. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. John, whenever the season ends, this is when you and your people at the Football Scoop kick into high gear. Are you resting? Is your phone always on? Is it ever off? How are you feeling right now?
No, not a lot of rest. The crazy thing, Greg, and you know it because you track recruiting and you do wear so many different hats for ISD and those guys. But the cycle keeps starting earlier, and so it's really been pretty full tilt for us at footballscoop.com since about mid-November is when things really ratcheted up a lot. Mm-hmm. So there's some more assistant coaching moves to come for sure at both the collegiate and the NFL levels. Then the NFL level movement will cause some trickle-down effect to the college levels. But December and January have been and are our craziest months in the current cycle. But it will continue over into February. Not a lot of rest, but I don't expect anybody to feel sorry for me. I could have it a lot worse than visiting with you or bumping into Ge Wang before the national championship game the way that I did last Monday in Atlanta. So, I'm pretty fortunate overall.
Yeah, guys everywhere. He's the man. I think because of the run that Notre Dame went on, I think fans kind of are hit really hard with like, okay, it is the off season. It's portal season. It's coaching carousel season. And I was texting with a friend of mine who's an Iowa State fan yesterday. She was asking me about Jim Knowles and that whole situation. I was like, I'll tell you this. It's better to go through the DC thing having won the game. So it's better to have won than to go through it. But there was some, I don't want to say breaking news, breaking situation to monitor for Notre Dame fans. Talk of Joe Rudolph possibly interviewing with the Bears. Nate Tice mentioned it on his podcast at Football 301. It's on YouTube. It's a Yahoo podcast. And I think the reason Nate Tice might have some insight into this is I believe he was a player of Joe Rudolph at Wisconsin way back when. So he might have some insight there. What have you kind of heard on this situation? Set the DEFCON level, I guess, for Notre Dame fans here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty early in the process. I don't think that Rudolph, based on the conversations I've had literally as recently as 20 minutes before joining you on the show, is necessarily the only candidate on the Bears' radar. Certainly, Joe Rudolph has been a Midwest guy. He's got some ties to the new regime there in Chicago, and you already outlined his connections with Tice and their time together at Wisconsin. I do know that Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman have been meeting with individual coaches in addition to having their exit meetings with players and people like that. And they're discussing raises with pretty much every coach on staff, and that's continued. That's expected to continue moving forward. So it's a situation to monitor. I don't think that it's a situation quite to the level of Al Golden, where once you knew that job with the Bengals was open, that it was going to be Al Golden and maybe one or two other legitimate candidates. And days before Notre Dame ever played in the national championship game, it was very clear that Al Golden had been zeroed in as the top target for the Bengals. And frankly, we already had a story written at Football Scoop to publish as soon as the game ended last Monday night that not only was Al Golden a top target, but Al Golden was the target and had in fact been offered the job at that point in time.
Yeah, I think there's levels to that, right? You could just kind of feel it, the tenor for which everyone was kind of talking about it. I think the way that he answered questions too with the media, you kind of knew like a lot of non denials from Al Golden there. Ge Wang is here, the man, the myth, the JB. How did you become? First of all, how did you become the John Brice? Tell the story about how you kind of became that figure within the ISD community.
I guess it was because the 2020 Notre Dame Clemson game, and I was the only person at ISD, I believe, at that time who picked Notre Dame to beat Clemson in that COVID year matchup that only had like 12,000 people in the stands, and I just really felt very strongly that Notre Dame was going to answer the call that night and perform really well and get a win over an undefeated top-ranked team. And that's exactly what the Fighting Irish did. So I guess that is the origin story. I can tell you, even as I wander campus on game days, and my wife works for Notre Dame. I don't think that's any big secret. And so occasionally I drop by some of her events on campus, and I still have people who remember that now 4.5 years ago, I picked Notre Dame to beat Clemson in that game. So it's pretty funny. That's it. I guess that's the origin story. I really don't know. I met Ge through Matt Freeman because Matt Freeman is low key the World Wide West of South Bend. So
yes. So when I joined ISD and I started making picks, people kept referencing that. And I was like, I wonder what that is. Like, I don't know what that refers to. It makes sense. I tell you, Matt. Speaking of Matt, he's very famous for having picked against Notre Dame a couple of times this year. So that's interesting for him. But he was the one. I mean, he was the one who picked Notre Dame to lose to Ohio State, and obviously that happened. He almost picked the score right too. Buddy Mitchell, thank you for the super chat. Love the show. JB and Greg are the best.
Thanks,
people
buddy.
love John Brice around here. All right, let's get to kind of like some of the hottest pressing news on Notre Dame beat. How surprised were you that Chad Bowden, or that news came across that he was interested in the USC job and then ultimately took the job? That all happened very quickly.
I can't say that I was overly surprised, Greg. I'd started picking up on it, frankly, the weekend in Atlanta prior to the college football playoff championship game. And the fact of the matter was, I'd been told even in advance of that that there was another program out there, power conference program, that had been in intense pursuit of Chad. Now, since that time, I found out that program was Oklahoma, and Oklahoma, it's my understanding, had made an incredibly lucrative offer to Chad. Maybe not as much as USC ended up paying, but it made a significant offer and a significant raise of more than $500,000 more than what he was making at Notre Dame to try and get Chad to come and become the Sooners general manager. Brent Venables and Lincoln Riley both enter 2025 on considerable hot seats. I would think that Brent Venables' hot seat is a little bit warmer. I would also think that any number of things make that USC job for Chad more attractive right now than what Oklahoma would be. There's just a more natural built-in talent base. There's an urgency. There's an urgency with both programs, but there's an urgency and a resource commitment, I think, at USC that's going to give Chad a chance to be empowered to really immediately impact and elevate that USC roster. But I can't say I was overly surprised. I know a lot of people have been frustrated because they're like, oh, well, he flirted with Michigan last year. Well, look, Notre Dame has made some great strides. And this past year, Notre Dame had two of the highest paid coordinators anywhere in college or pro football, and Al Golden on defense and Mike Denbrock on offense. It has since dramatically elevated its commitment to Marcus Freeman. Remember, Marcus was only making about $7 million for the 2024 season, not anywhere near the top 10. And then Lauren Lando, I believe, is top 5. So for all of that good, Notre Dame has lagged behind in human resources in the size of Chad's personnel department. It had lagged behind on Chad's salary somewhere in the 275 to 300 range. He left money on the table to not go to Michigan and to stay loyal to Notre Dame.
So the Oklahoma insight is interesting because when I heard the money that USC went to for him, I was thinking to myself, who were they bidding against? It just didn't seem like they needed to go as high as they did, but the Oklahoma information makes it a little bit more sense. Tell me about like the difference between because my understanding of what Chad's responsibilities are going to be at USC are far exceed what his responsibilities would have been at Notre Dame. Tell me about that difference, and then we can transition to how Notre Dame kind of fills this role. Because I feel like what his job is at USC, he will do the recruiting stuff, but he's also in charge of like so much more than he would have been at Notre Dame. And I think that was a big kind of a big selling point for him as well.
Yeah, Chad's a go-getter. He's got crazy energy. He's got toddler energy, and I'm jealous of it. And so he is going to wear a much broader hat. You can think Melania Trump inauguration hat, like a big broad hat that's got it's got room for a lot of responsibilities on it. And he's going to be involved in not only hiring his own staff to run the personnel and recruiting departments at USC that he'll oversee, but I think he'll have a hand in doing some other hiring as well, much like Courtney Morgan at the University of Alabama, who was initially Southern Cal's top target, and they made 2 different runs at Morgan. And that also, I think, factored into how they approached the recruitment of Chad. But he'll have a hand in some of the other personnel moves. He may be involved with hiring analysts on the offensive and defensive staff, special teams. I know Courtney Morgan at Alabama has had a hand in hiring even some of the nutritionist staff and some of the strength and conditioning staff. And so this is going to be a much broader role for Chad. It's a chance to grow his career. I think he views it very much as a chance to help him have an eye toward the NFL. And it's going to be really interesting. I think the GM position is maybe going to be the most revelatory position in college football in the coming years, because are we going to see guys with NFL experience try to apply that to the college level, or are we going to see guys at the college level like a Chad Bowden continue to round out his skill set so that it can potentially translate to the NFL? But the unanimous is that college is going to become much more NFL-like for that general manager role, in that it's going to have to become a much more dispassionate role. And I was at the College Football Hall of Fame Saturday night or Sunday night before the title game when Notre Dame had a special event there, and Christian Gray's mom spoke, and she was phenomenal. She gave an incredibly emotional speech where even just, third-party attendees that weren't tied to either team were really riveted by her speech. I thought it was just outstanding. And she point blank said, Christian Gray is at Notre Dame today instead of LSU because Chad Bowden took him on a golf cart and drove him all over campus on one of Christian's visits the day that his girlfriend broke up with him. And Christian wore sunglasses all day in all the photos because he was crying so much. And then Mike Mickens joined them on the golf cart ride. And if you've heard this story, then I apologize for repeating it. I had not heard it in that depth. And she just said, if those guys didn't talk to my boy about life so far beyond football, he would never be at Notre Dame. Well, as this GM position changes, it's going to be increasingly hard for a Chad Bowden or Courtney Morgan or James Blanchard or whomever else to have those types of relationships. It's going to have to be much more mechanical. It's going to have to be much more devoid of emotion, and it's going to have to be far more about the black and white, the production of it. There's not going to be a lot of gray area in roster management and revenue distribution.
So an example of that, then, I think is, in my opinion, ironically, I think USC might be an example of that, where you have, I'll just use a guy like Zachariah Branch because he immediately comes to mind with this. He is a player that he's a 5-star out of high school, right? And you would have, I could see a school out of high school giving him a large NIL kind of package there, right? Well, his first year goes well. The second year, he doesn't do as well. He scores 1 touchdown, and he wants to be paid like a 5-star player. And someone might make the valuation or the determination that, no, like, you're not producing like that, and we don't project that you will. You need to essentially take a pay cut, right? Like you see in a lot of NFL situations where someone signs and then they got to restructure their contract, aka take a pay cut. How does someone like Chad Bowden, who brought him in and did the human thing with him? We're kind of blending stories here, but you understand what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
how does someone like Chad Bowden wear two kind of hats like that? And so, so my question is Notre Dame going to try to replace Chad Bowden essentially with two different roles? Are they? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think they need to. I think they're going to have to. I think you still have to have the relationship people because the money is going to end up being fairly similar at a lot of the programs. And there's not going to be just outlandish differentiation in dollars most of the time. There will still be some outlier cases, but in most of the time, I think the money's going to still be very similar. So you're going to have some of those foundational relationships, whether that's for Notre Dame via Zaire or Carter Allman or Caleb Davis or some of the other people, or before he left, Dre Brown or somebody like that. But then you're still going to have to, again, have somebody that is far more in the binary mode of operating things, and that it's going to have to be, again, far more mechanical and about the production. And you're not going to be able to bring your feelings to the table. And I know GMs around the business that are starting to deal with this, and I say the business, that's what college football is. I was with a bunch of them at the FCA convention earlier this month in Charlotte, and the new mode for a lot of them is going to be, okay, here's your projected revenue share agreement that you can sign with our school. And if you come in as a freshman and you're a contributor, maybe you're going to make 150. And if you move into the starting lineup in year 2, you're set to make 200. And then if you become an all-conference performer in year 2, your pay automatically goes up to 250 or 275. So there will be, I think, some front-end things done, Greg, that will allow players to say, okay, not too different than a lot of professional contracts, be it MLB or NFL or whatever, where if you achieve some incentives, then your pay automatically goes up. But if you don't achieve those incentives and you're going into year 3 and you're still not a starter or you're still not an all-conference contributor, then you're going to be back down in that $150,000 range, or maybe even 100. And if you don't like it, you're probably going to go into the portal and find somebody who will pay you more. And it's like backup quarterbacks in the NFL. It's like journeyman relievers. And frankly, a lot of times it's like coaching. There's somebody out there who always believes he can do the job better than whomever he is replacing.
Right. And I don't think this was the case with these particular players in terms of NIL, because I think it was more of a playing time thing. But Notre Dame's offensive line situation is kind of a good gauge for that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And again, I don't believe those are NIL situations. I mean, that's definitely involved for them, right? If you're Sam Pendleton, you're going to get more money from Tennessee to start than you would for Notre Dame if you're not going to be a starter for them, right? So that's kind of a natural thing. Is Notre Dame at a crossroads then? Like, is this kind of a wake-up call for them, losing Chad, not just for the fact that they lost him, but the fact that, like, the amount of money that it took to get him from another school? If you want someone comparable to that, maybe you're not going to pay, if it's a dual role thing, maybe you're not going to pay any one person that amount of money, but the total money invested in that department, it's got to go up. Like, it sounds to me like Notre Dame needs to make some decisions here that are just like, you have to pay more for this role.
Yeah, and you got to pay way more. It can't be, you can't be willing to go from 275 to 400 because anybody over there would tell you that Chad did more work than just a single role. Now, some of that was just like Chad being so bent on doing everything and being a part of everything and just sort of being this force majeure. But I do think that it's got to be spread out a little bit, and I do think it will take significant financial commitment. I will also say, and again, I know this firsthand, that Notre Dame has received interest from SEC GMs, from 3, if not 4 Big 12 GMs, and from multiple ACC GMs. I don't know about any Big 10 off the top of my head. I would not at all be surprised by that. But those other 3 of the 4 power conferences, I can confidently state that Notre Dame has received considerable interest from all of those conferences. from personnel within those conferences who would be very interested in replacing Chad and becoming the general manager of Notre Dame football. So it is a very attractive position. Notre Dame's going to have to meet that attractiveness that everybody sees from the surface and sees a program that has been strategic in the portal and just coming off a national championship appearance and has a lot of key pieces back. They're going to have to meet that with financial resources. People within the program as recently, again, as this afternoon have indicated to me, Notre Dame is prepared to make that commitment in that regard, similar to what I outlined that it has already made in recent years, particularly to Al Golden, Mike Denbrock, and Lauren Lando.
Yeah, I think it made sense from the coaching perspective, right? Like, and that's very easy to – it's very easy to make that valuation is like you got to pay for the top assistants, right? I think for them, I don't know. I don't want to say they were slow to this, but I think now, again, what happened this offseason, it kind of opens their eyes. Like, you have to, these are premium positions, just like an OC, just like a DC, just like a head coach. You got to treat it like that. And if you don't, you're going to fall behind.
Real quickly, I'd just like to interject. I love that point by you, Greg. I think that's a fascinating point, and it leads me to just pivot and make this or supply this piece of additional evidence, and that is we referenced Courtney Morgan at Alabama, and going into the season, he was the highest paid GM in college football last August as USC first came after him. He got a 3-year deal that I want to say paid him $850 and $900 over the 3 years. And he's expected to have that pay elevated yet again. Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that Kalen DeBoer in Alabama also kept on staff Bob Welton, who has been a director of personnel, recruiting, whatever. He's been the lead guy at the University of Tennessee in addition to the University of Alabama. I think he turned down Michigan a couple of times through the years. He's Michigan native. He also has about 12 to 14 years of NFL experience. And so when you talk about Notre Dame has made those valuations on the coaching side, will it make those valuations and commitments on the personnel side? You see a place like Alabama that even before the market has exploded like it is right now, and there's more to come out there at the GM level, Alabama already had that commitment. Georgia has made a lot of that commitment. Ohio State still has Mark Pantoni, one of the veterans of all of college football in the personnel arena. And then they've supplemented him with some incredibly skilled and some incredibly well-paid people around him also.
Yeah. So you just, they need to shift their thinking in the way that they evaluate filling these positions, and the money and the investment that it takes in doing that. It's just not your coaching staff. It's all the rest of this. And you're seeing it around college football. And they need to do it quickly, right? Because they are in the situation to do those things. I think, and there's a super chat here from Told It to Your Face. So what? That one of our favorite screen names on this show. But it's asking about money. And so I'm going to blend it into kind of a point about recruiting too. Because Chad Bowden, like you said, he did so many things for Notre Dame. And I think getting Notre Dame to where they are, like, look, Notre Dame had a national title game roster, right? And that even had to do with injuries, right? The injuries to some of their top players that they would have given NIL money to come back, right? Like Riley Mills, for example. Ben Morrison would have commanded a lot in NIL as well. In the recruiting, though, so the last 3 classes, you finished 12th, 9th, and 12th. And it's about where Notre Dame was, right? And I think a lot of that is supplemented by the work they've done in the portal, which has been very good. They've been very good in the portal. So that gets supplemented there. How does Notre Dame get to the point where I think Marcus Freeman wants to get, where you're in on the Jeremiah Smiths of the world, where you're in on the Caleb Downs of the world, right? Where Notre Dame has they've gotten top players. It's not like they haven't, right? Like Kingston Viliamoasa is an example of that. I think Bryce Young is an example of that. Will Blackett is an example of that. They've gotten top flight players, but not the type that they need. And so then I'll read the question here from the super chat from the listener here. Love your blunt, no BS reporting, John, which is true. Which is true? Is it that Notre Dame cannot, or is it that Notre Dame will not pay upfront money to recruit elite D linemen or wide receivers? Essentially, the top targets that they want. So how does Notre Dame get to that point? Basically, is it strictly a money thing? Is it something else?
I think at the wide receiver position, you can't say it's strictly a money thing. Now, look, Notre Dame, I know with certainty, and again, this is something I've discussed at length with Matt Freeman. He's one of my best friends in the reporting world. He's one of my best friends anywhere.
Yeah.
I think very strongly that, well, I know firsthand, as I bounce around here, I apologize. I'm on very little sleep. Notre Dame at most was number 3 in NIL payroll of the 4 semifinalist teams. I don't have an accurate enough gauge to know exactly where Penn State was going into the 24 season, but I know that Notre Dame was half of both Texas and Ohio State. I'm certain of that. I'm
less than. Right.
Yes,
it was 20
right.
million, but 20 million. I mean, this is your reporting as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not, this is like you said, no sleep, maybe the numbers, but 7 to 8 million for Notre Dame, 20 million for Texas and Ohio State. And I want to ask about those figures in a second, but please continue.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that point is that Notre Dame had some finite resources, and so it couldn't throw as much money at a wide receiver when it's had to go into the portal and pay a 7-figure quarterback the past few years. Now Notre Dame is positioned to have a in-house quarterback, and presumably an in-house quarterback for multiple seasons. It should have more money allocated for difference makers on the defensive interior, or a Jeremiah Smith type guy on the perimeter. Now, I do think you got to show some more with your scheme before you're going to get a Jeremiah Smith. Look, Notre Dame is tight end U and O-line U in a lot of ways right now. It is not wide receiver U. Yeah. Ohio State is undisputably wide receiver U right now. So if the money is even remotely comparable, you're still going to pick Ohio State right now, because they're putting dudes not just in the NFL, but first-round dudes in the NFL every year. They're putting dudes in the Pro Bowl every year. They're putting guys probably all-pro receivers, every year. So I think that's a big difference. I do think that Notre Dame is poised to make a significant jump. I asked Pete Bavacqua point blank in his press conference that he had maybe in early December about Notre Dame's commitment to revenue sharing, and he said we're going to do the full share, and that yes, the majority of that will go to football. So I think as long as that passes, and now that's not a clear-cut thing. That's got hurdles coming, because Title IX. People are now getting some Title IX components involved in the revenue sharing structure that has been almost approved out there, or approved and is waiting on final court approval in April. So that would position Notre Dame to potentially jump from like 8 million to 14.5 to 15 million, which is obviously much better for your roster. So I think it's more positional at wide receiver. I think now that Notre Dame has quarterbacks in-house, that it can spend more on its defensive interior.
So I just want to be clear about this. Notre Dame had 7 to 8 million at their disposal to use, not that they paid 7 to 8 million. I want to, so like an example that I've been giving is, let's say Rod Hurd wasn't a thing, right? And look, you'll see where I'm going with this. Rod Hurd does not command the money of this player. Let's say Caleb Downs called up Marcus Freeman and said, I want to play football for you. Ohio State's offering X. Can you offer X? Would Notre Dame have found the money to get Caleb Downs into their program, having paid everyone else, the quarterback and all those other guys? Or would they have said, we can't do that?
That's a great question, because they had X Watts, and I think they felt really good about Schuler, but maybe
that's why I brought up Rod Hurd, because like they did take a safety, right? They did want,
and they got it, and they took a safety that they paid NIL money for. Now, they obviously didn't pay.
You don't have to pay Rod Hurd as much, but
right.
So
exactly. I think it would be different. I think if Caleb Downs came to them right now and said, "I want to play my last year of college football at Notre Dame," I do believe Notre Dame would find a way to make that happen from a fiscal resources standpoint.
Okay. So, because part of it to me has just been like, the big money guys need to want to come to your university in order to pay them. It's kind of like a lot of the MLB teams don't have the payroll of the Dodgers because Shohei decided to play for the Dodgers and not their teams, right? The Dodger payroll wouldn't be what it was if Shohei wanted to go to the Padres, for example, right? And the Padres would get a lot more.
Yeah, and again, just like the wide receiver thing, Notre Dame's got to put some some stud ducks into the NFL from that defensive interior. And Howard Cross and Riley Mills will go down as exceptional college football players. But I don't think they're not being projected at the next level like some of the dudes that Notre Dame faced along this playoff run, be it Ohio State's interior guys or what Abdul Carter obviously is projected. I just saw this week that he's moved up to where some sites now have him as the betting favorite to be the number 1 overall pick. Notre Dame doesn't have that on defense right now. I think when people talk about Notre Dame getting somewhere and sustaining it, I think there are multiple keys to that. But number 1 is they've got to quit having a different starting quarterback every year, and they've got to get some absolute beasts on the defensive interior.
They do have to get a little bit lucky as well. And in terms of like someone like Blake Fisher doesn't want to go pro and be a second-round pick. Like he wants to try to be a first-round pick. They did get unlucky with Joe Alt. Like you're never keeping a talent like Joe Alt in school. He's like, what was he, the top 5 pick or whatever it was? Like you're never keeping him around. And like, this is the first true junior that has left Notre Dame's offensive line. I couldn't even think of another one, like true junior. So they got unlucky with that. Like this year, Ben Morrison, he, is no longer a consensus going in the first round guy. He enters the draft, right? Like you need guys like that to come back. Ohio State got all of those guys to come back. And obviously that was a great benefit to them, and they were all available for the championship game. And
now we've seen stunningly a similar decision at Penn State, in my opinion, with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both coming back in addition to Drew Aller, especially Nick Singleton. But I do think, Greg, we're going to see more of this. We're going to see more guys like X Watts, like Riley Mills, like Howard Cross, who can take a chance on coming back to improve their draft stock, because that senior year or super senior year can be so lucrative for them in the near term that it makes financial sense and future financial sense. And it used to be that college didn't have that. It used to be if a guy could go pro after 3 years, he had to go pro right then to start getting paid. And I do think we'll see more guys that are getting 3, 4, especially 4, 5, and 6 round grades electing to come back.
Yeah, I don't think there's any case to be made that Xavier Watts did not really set himself up financially, not just because of what he got to come back, but now he's a much better pro prospect. I think he just is. So that's a really good example. I do wonder, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because in terms of value, right? Notre Dame, they paid, let's say, $7 to $8 million for the roster and NIL money.
Yeah,
they made $20 million, right? In terms of value, those other schools like Texas didn't get the max value out of theirs. Oregon didn't get the max value out of what they paid for theirs. Do you think that Notre Dame feels like they do need to, do they feel like the difference in money that they paid from with respect to a school like Ohio State, do you feel like they are of the opinion that was the difference and they need to get to that point? Because from a business standpoint, what they paid, they got value for it.
Yeah, they did get value for it. You make a great point, Greg. Like dollar for dollar, probably you would look at Notre Dame like you do Notre Dame's endowment and say, nobody's investing better than these guys. Nobody had a smarter priced roster in this entire college football season than what Notre Dame did. Now, again, for all those recruiting rankings, I would look at the rest of Notre Dame's roster and say, okay, well, look how they've identified, evaluated talent, and then developed it and had those guys contribute for them, like a Leonard Moore or even Ben Morrison when he came out. Like those guys had nice offer lists, but they weren't coveted like a Caleb Downs was coming out, and Notre Dame has helped develop them into stars. I do think when you hear, we all know how fanatically competitive Marcus Freeman is.
Yeah,
and it's awesome. Yeah. And if you talk to the right people in the building, you'll hear stories about how freaking competitive he is at playing cards. Like he does not want to lose. And he'll sit at a card table with some of his coaches and play cards, not during the season, but if the timing's right, he'll play cards all night long until he leaves a winner. And so I think that bleeds over into the mindset of the program. We've heard Pete Mavakwa say he's maniacally obsessed. He point blank said, we're going to commit fully to the revenue share, and we're going to invest the majority of that into our football program. And there's no question that football is a driver of the entire campus of Notre Dame. It drives up applications. It's already an impossible school to get into. I forget the exact number, but it's a minuscule percentage of first-time applicants who are even welcomed into Notre Dame. But all of that stuff drives more money for Notre Dame. And I can tell you from seeing the events that were staged by Notre Dame, the work that all of their advanced teams did, from Brian Diss to Riley Koval to all these people that were one step ahead. When you had Notre Dame playing Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, there'd been an entire contingent of Notre Dame people who had already been to Miami with plans to have events set up for Notre Dame. It was the same thing before they ever got to Atlanta. That's why Notre Dame was able to have that incredible event at the College Football Hall of Fame. And that all leads to more money ultimately for the school. That all leads to more exposure for the school. Pete Sampson said it best, like Notre Dame for the final month of the college football season was on a national billboard, both its football program and its university.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you invest in something, right? You invest in it and then you get that X amount.
You got to spend money to make money.
Spend money to make money. That's right. Notre Dame did that. You can do that with your media company, John. I don't know if you know that. If you go with VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Sadwazadeh, VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106.
Wow. Vahid, a former colleague of my wife, Jess Brice, who's just out there killing the game so much that he left Notre Dame, put on those gold shoes, and said, I'm going to make those dollar bills, y'all. And that's what he's doing.
That's right. Vahid's killing it. Notre Dame looking for a new defensive coordinator. That I think when this first broke that Al Golden was going to Cincinnati, I think a lot of people, myself included, thought easy transition over to Mike Mickens as the defensive coordinator. It doesn't appear to be the case. Notre Dame, it seems, is very set on keeping him around as a co-DC. Kind of where, and according to you, where is as from where you understand it, where do things stand with Notre Dame's defensive coordinator search at the moment?
Yeah, I think, again, in talking to a number of people, including Matt Freeman, who's been a very dogged reporter on this, I think Chris Ash is right there continuing to be at the top of the list. I think that it's pretty far along with Chris Ash. Marcus Freeman today is down at the Senior Bowl. Makes a lot of sense. He wants to see his guys down there. It's more good branding for Notre Dame to be seen down there. It's probably a spot where he can talk to potential replacements for Chad Bowden as well. So I still think I would be surprised if Mike Mickens was not in a co-defensive coordinator role. I think that there have been talks about that's the next evolutionary step for Mike and his growth as a coach. I do think there was some initial interest there from Al Golden about taking Mickens with him to Cincinnati. But again, when I said earlier, Notre Dame had invested in Al Golden and Mike Denbrock and Lauren Lando, all of those guys making over 7 figures, Denbrock and Golden over $2 million apiece. There's not a lot of NFL salaries like that, frankly. Now, I do believe Al Golden is probably going to be in the 2.75 to 3 million range with around a 3-year deal with the Bengals. But that was an opportunity for Al that also is about him being better positioned to be an NFL head coach. And when I talk to people at the convention, when I talk to people the last couple of weeks, there's a belief Al Golden has a better path to become an NFL head coach like he wants to be than a path to become a college head coach again. And so that move made so much sense in every direction for Al Golden. And his family had loved Cincinnati. For Notre Dame, I still think it's a lot about Chris Ash and then Mike Mickens being in a co-defensive coordinator role. I think Marcus Freeman has made it abundantly clear he likes having a former head coach on staff. Chris Ash has that experience, and he wants it set up to where he has so much confidence in his offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, defensive coordinator, whoever it officially becomes, and then special teams coordinator, Marty Biaggi, that he's able to operate at a macro, true CEO level. And he'll still coach a special teams unit. He coached the punt coverage team unit this year or whatever. but he likes being able to be in that commanding oversight role and having people, particularly at the top of his org chart, that he can really rely on.
His desire to be the macro coach and the CEO type coach, is that what you think drove the decision to not go with Mike Mickens overall? Because I feel like he would have had, even if it was Mickens, like because I've been someone who's kind of opined. I don't know that I've said it on a show, but just in talking to like Matt Freeman and Jamie Uyama about, like, he could just do the thing that Fickle did with Freeman, where Fickle kind of elevated Freeman to the DC role, but I think Fickle was the de facto co-DC in that situation at Cincinnati. Marcus, it seems, does not want to do that. And do you think that was what, like, kind of the main driver of why he made this decision away from Mickens?
Yeah, I think that factored into it. I think that also, let's be honest, there was a little bit of scarring in the transition from Tommy Rees to Jared Parker, and the way that situation was publicly bungled along the way a bit with having Colin Klein in, and Colin Klein withdrawing his name, and having Andy Ludwig in and being very visible with Andy Ludwig at the game, and then butchering what it was going to take from a contract standpoint. Again, now hindsight 2020, that ended up a blessing in disguise, because Andy Ludwig, very well respected, got fired midway through the 2024 season by Utah. So I think those are the two elements. You're right. I thought it would be a very similar situation to what Freeman himself had experienced at Cincinnati, that he could further mold and guide Mike Mickens along as head coach and essentially that co-defensive coordinator. But he does want that more oversight, clear overtop view of his program, rather than being involved in the day-to-day minutia. He wants to be able to leave one meeting room and go down the hallway to another meeting room and see what's happening with special teams. What kind of crazy, amazing gadget is Marty Biaggi working up? And then he wants to be able to float and see what Dylan McCullough is doing with his list of jobs for all of his running backs. So I think that's what he likes. And I think that's helped him grow. I think that's why they brought in Anthony Tresh as well, to handle the analytics and to strengthen Marcus in for his in-game management and things of that nature.
Do you think that the desire to keep Mickens as a co-DC has kind of narrowed the field in terms of who you can go after? Because
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so, because you're Notre Dame. You're coming off a national championship appearance. Like I'll tell you very candidly, when we first moved to South Bend, now 7 years ago, as crazy as it is, and I was just doing some freelance media and have been burned out of the SEC. We didn't move up here so that my wife could work for Notre Dame. And then a couple of years after living here, Notre Dame recruited her, and she was with a great CPA firm that was a top 50, top 45 CPA firm in the United States, headquartered out of Nashville. And Notre Dame recruited her, and we were driving into the Tetons on vacation when she got the call and got the offer. And I just said, well, you're never going to regret having Notre Dame on your resume. Mm-hmm. And I think that's applicable for her role, or a professor, or a football coach. You're never going to regret having Notre Dame on your resume. So no, I don't believe it narrows the field, because we've seen the financial commitment. We've seen the on-the-field success. We've seen that Marcus Freeman is an absolute commodity who will elevate his coaches, who does let them speak to the media on a regular basis, who does not try to obscure the accomplishments or the contributions of his assistant coaches. So no, I just don't believe that. Look, it's got to be a right cultural fit. Yeah. Notre Dame talked to Jim Knowles. We reported that last week at Football Scoop. They absolutely had conversations with Jim Knowles. I don't know that it was necessarily deemed a right cultural fit or a right financial fit, even though Notre Dame has indicated it's prepared to pay whatever it needs to pay to get the right fits to keep the program moving forward.
And so they must, I mean, should Chris Ash be the one who's offered the job and accepts that? And they must feel comfortable. I mean, Marcus Freeman must feel comfortable about that fit. I know there's been kind of some questions and some, comments about, how Chris Ash was at previous stops and things of that nature. Certainly that's something Marcus Freeman has vetted. I mean, he's spoken to Chris Ash as well. he obviously has relationships with Luke Fickell. He coached with him at, Marcus Freeman coached with Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell coached with Chris Ash as well. He must have obviously gotten some insight into, Chris Ash, the coach, and Chris Ash, the schemer and play caller and things of that nature. So we'll just have to monitor the developments there. Last thing for you is I know that you've spoken a lot about upcoming players that haven't really, didn't really see the field last year. Ge Lambert is someone that I know you've kind of pounded the table for as like an ascending type of player. First of all, let's talk about Ge Lambert for a second and why you feel that way, and then we'll talk about some more players you think are kind of primed to break out next year.
Yeah, I was still down in Tennessee, and in my crossover from working with Rivals and Yahoo into my 247 CBS era, when Trey Smith was being recruited and ended up being named the #1 recruit in the country by ESPN. And I know basically his 3 finalists, I think, were Tennessee, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. And so I bring up Trey Smith because I very much view Ge Lambert incredibly similarly on and off the field, except I think Ge Lambert is maybe even a little more physically impressive already than Trey Smith. Now, Trey Smith plays with one of the nastiest dispositions I've ever seen, and he's carried that into the NFL, and that's why he's been a Pro Bowl guard already for the Chiefs, who never would have been a 5th or 6th round pick had he not had the heart condition that some folks had some questions or concerns about that he's obviously allayed. But I just think Ge Lambert is a future NFL player. I think it's very obvious. I think he's a starter sooner rather than later. Does that mean he starts August 30th against whoever Notre Dame even opens with? I can't even remember at this point. Or does it mean he's a starter by the end of September? Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm absolutely convinced that Ge Lambert is a starter and a future NFL draft pick on Notre Dame's offensive line.
Need it, right? You need those kind of athletes. I think, and a lot of people have speculated that Anthony Knapp might be better inside, maybe as a center, or maybe one of the guards. So that'll be interesting to kind of track throughout the offseason, spring, and in the fall camp and things of that nature. CJ Carr.
Yeah, I love CJ Carr. Like his skill set, he makes throws, and his arm looked a lot better near the close of this playoff run. A lot of the velo back, stretching with some more distance on his throws, even in pregame warmups. But you just see him. He's had some throws where he's throwing over the 2nd level in front of the 3rd level defender, and it's just beautiful. And his accuracy is phenomenal. And I would say don't even listen to a slap like me and listen to what Riley Leonard said back in August or September when somebody said, can you compare where CJ Carr is as a freshman right now compared to where you were as a freshman? He goes, no, I can't, because there's no comparison. There's no worthy comparison. I've never seen a guy like CJ Carr as a true freshman. So forget a couple of dorks like you and me talking ball on a Wednesday afternoon at the end of January and listen to a guy like Riley Leonard, who will be a draft pick, and listen to him say he's never seen anybody like that. And he's a guy who's been at the Manning Passing Academy multiple times, and he's trained with David Morris, who's worked with some of the best quarterbacks coming into college football in recent years and continued to work with guys even as they've become pros. So, yeah, CJ Carr just has an accuracy and an understanding of the game. I think he's a better athlete than a lot of us realized. I'm very bullish on the future of CJ Carr.
Yeah, and I think player comments carry a little bit more weight because Ben Morrison said that Leonard Moore was better than him, and that might be true. He's been unbelievable. So I think these guys sometimes they don't always have a greatest gauge of like who their coach should be, but they definitely know who's kind of got the goods. Anyone else that kind of sticks out to you when I say, oh, this guy, look out for him, or who, some players that might stand out next year?
I hope we see a full sort of a full display of Kedron Young this spring. Certainly there's not going to be any need to see Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price virtually any at all this spring. And we've glimpsed Aeneas Williams, but Kedron Young is a guy that I'm excited to see. Charles Jagasaw is still so physically gifted, but has been so limited by different things since he got here. Anthony Knapp deserves all the credit in the world for stepping into a role that so few people could have stepped into anywhere in college football and helping be an anchor for Notre Dame along this title run to the title game. But I don't think he's a full-time tackle moving forward. So what does that mean for his positional flexibility? Where does Sullivan Absher fit in? Can he take that next step? Notre Dame has multiple NFL linemen on its offensive line. I'm really excited for the continued development of Bryce Young. I think he has future. I don't want to be unfair to a guy, but he's just so incredible with his football intelligence as well as his physical skill set. And then he's so coachable and he has some intangibles. When you talk to people on staff and they talk about how much he embraced the special teams role that he continued to carve on a greater basis and how much it became important to him to learn how to get that extra inch so that he can block more kicks. Like, there's just so many things he does well. He will be one of those guys I've been talking about on this show that can be an absolute transcendent player on Notre Dame's defensive line that they can hold up to future recruits and to future guys in the portal and say, we will empower you to do this. Come play and be a part of this.
I was saying, I think the offseason for the young defenders specifically, I think from a physical development standpoint is so important because I feel like they all played because they were ready to play. They're playmakers. The KVAs, even the Drake Bowens and the Adon Schulers, right? Like the redshirt freshmen, or the redshirt freshman. Christian Gray is another one who was a true sophomore, right? Like played so many snaps, 16-game season. I think physically for them, it's just about getting that physical maturity that you need to be, big-time college football player.
I'm glad you brought up Adon Schuler because he was going to be the final one that I think I closed with. And again, I'll bring it up to the people that live it and know it so much more than we do, no matter how much time we try to spend with it. And we had a piece on Football Scoop that ran the day of the title game. It's one of the favorite things I've done in a while, and it was a Coaches Confidential. Coaches scouted the title game for us, and it was about a dozen different coaches from all across the country, SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Group of Five, who scouted Ohio State and Notre Dame. They had all the coaches that we talked to had faced one or both of those teams during the 24 season. And I can't tell you how many of those guys told me, hey, 8 on Notre Dame's defense. I know the other guy's the All-American. 8 on Notre Dame's defense is their best safety. 8 is their best pro. 8 is this. Like, the respect out there from other coaches. And it's not even a shameless plug. It's like, if you're a football nerd, go back and read our Coaches Scout the college football playoff title game that ran on Monday, January 20th or whatever it was, because it's so informative. And you'll see some of those comments about Adon Schuler in there.
He's at John Brice 1 on Twitter. You can find him on the Football Scoop. He's always scooping everything. He's got all the information. We're always looking out for your reports and everything and for the latest on what's going on with Notre Dame program, college football, NFL, whatever it might be. So you do a great job. I'm glad I finally got you on this show. It's a total disaster that I haven't done it before, but I'm doing it now. And it was a great conversation. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, man. Honored.
Anything else?
Yeah. No, just really fired up to join you guys. I'll be forever grateful to Mike Frank and Matt Freeman. And I've hosted Mike Frank and Matt and Jamie at the house, which just means Greg, quit screwing around. And the next time you're in the bin, get over here and visit with us, buddy.
I think Texas A&M next year. I might have to take you up on that. I think I'll be in town. So, all right, everyone. Well, hope you enjoyed that. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we are going live. Jamie and I will be back tomorrow for another Hit and Hustle show. Had a good time. That was really fun. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.